Shrestha, member of Parliamentary Committee on Education, Health and Information Technology, elected as a proportional representative under the Indigenous People category 2022, Honorable Ms. Shrestha holds an MBA from MIT Sloan School of Management. She is a forward-thinking entrepreneur who founded Medication for Nepal to support remote areas in the country. Notably, she made significant contributions to the IT Bill Hackathon, an innovative event aimed at democratizing the lawmaking process in Nepal and giving the public a voice in it. Her pioneering spirit and dedication to the IT sector have been instrumental in promoting women's participation in technology and lawmaking processes. It's my pleasure to invite Honorable Ms. Sumana Shrestha to give her special remarks.
I had written this speech with good morning, but it's afternoon now. Good afternoon, everyone. I know it's lull time, but it's a pleasure to be here amongst very familiar faces I have known since my days of activism, to working, to reaching out for funding and whatnot. A very warm good afternoon. It's wonderful to be here. And I would really like to say a very big thank you to IIDS. We need these kind of reports so we know what to advocate for. This is something I've been advocating in Parliament time and again. You need to give us reasons why we should make law one way or the other way. And I think this particular report is gonna be guiding as we go about thinking about tech sector in general. So thank you. This needs to go far and wide. I feel like today we are a very self-selected group of people who already believe in tech, who've harnessed the tech industry. Now this message needs to go boom across nation, to every mayor, every deputy mayor, to every Pradesh Samsad, and to every parliamentarian. I would personally love to have you come and present at the parliamentary committee I serve in. Because that's where there's a really good intersection. You also need to go present at the parliamentary committee that oversees Ministry of Industry and Artha Samiti as well. But for me in particular, I would love for you to come and present it in the parliamentary committee. So it's not just us who are here, but we get a broad spectrum of cross-party, and we can form a narrative that regardless of who becomes Prime Minister, who becomes Education Minister, this work is going to continue because this is important work. And to everybody who is here from the tech sector, either you're freelancing, either you're running company, thank you. You're contributing quite a lot to the economy. And finally, today is the day that is formal something in black and white, and you're being recognized. I give you a round of applause. Thank you very much. I've been waiting for this study for a very long time, since I met Dr. Amrita, and I heard about it from Dr. Swarnim in the parliament. It's like, when is this report going to be out? When can I very publicly talk about it? When I can have access to your anonymized data so I can do a little bit of my own analysis as well. I've seen the potentials of this industry. I have worked in this industry in my past life, so I know how exciting things can get. But one of the things I know is this industry has prospered in Nepal not because of the government, it's in spite of the government. And maybe that is one of the reasons it has prospered. You have been able to work without a lot of regulatory interference from the government. And may we be able to keep it at that level, that government needs to rethink its lens as not just a regulator, but as a facilitator, as an entity that's going to help its people go and capture value in this industry. I hope there are four important policy implications from the presentation today by Dr. Amrita, and I'm going to lay it out. First, on the education front, it's quite evident our higher education is not delivering what we expect. Every day I get emails, messages about, oh, judge time ma bhayo, our exams are not on time, it's difficult to get job, and whatnot. But you know what I really think is it's an opportunity. In chaos, there's always an opportunity. It's an opportunity to rethink and redefine how we want our higher education to be. We need to connect education to jobs, to quality jobs. So the return on education is faster and better. So from this perspective, tech does create quality jobs. You saw the difference between beginner, middle, and senior programmers, the rate at which the salary progresses. It's rare to find that kind of industry. So tech is definitely an industry we need to prioritize. We need to really think, do we still need the 4-year bachelor's degree, or should we go the route of boot camps? There is one of the things that, me and my team we're doing is we're trying to go in front of the local government to help them rethink where they want to channel the money that they allocate on training. I see it as an urgent need to upskill our workforce, for which the budget already exists. It's all about coming up with the new education modality where the return on education is much faster. So the question we have in front of us is, how do private sector get involved in creating a pipeline of engineers? The other question that's involved is, how does education institution adapt out of the traditional education modality? Should we go the bootcamp route, have 9 months of Python? And we also saw the absolute need of soft skills, or I would actually say essential skills that's missing, that the industry currently is telling via the report. So how do we go about it? So those are the questions that we need to mull, and as parliamentarians we need to think, and as citizens of this country we need to start having a very deep discourse, not superficial discourse. And that's the reason why I would love for you all to come and present at the parliamentary committee, because it's the intersection of education, it's the intersection of ICT, and it's the intersection of youth ministry. It's the perfect parliamentary committee to go present the case. We need to rethink our education system. So the time to when an engineer becomes absolutely ready to put in front of client goes down from 6 months to 3 months. That's 3 additional months that every tech company can then earn, right? And also same for the freelancers. The faster they are to get in front of the clients, the faster they earn. So that's the first policy implications I see. The second is really, it's difficult, but it's much needed, the ease of doing business. How are we thinking about it? I am very glad to know and to be part of the the parliament session that recognized tech as an industry. But I think there's a lot more to do. I am glad the government finally recognizes it's not enough to say, make tech products and sell, that there is going to be a marketing expenditure for which you need to go outside the boundaries of country if we are going to earn in dollars. So it's good that we have those recognitions. It's good we have some tax subsidies for freelancers, but by and large, we need to do more. And here are some of the things I think we need to do more, for which we need to come together and create a narrative. We first need to identify what are the major roadblocks. It's good, FDI, the limit for FDI has been reduced, it's being negotiated, but the questions that we need to ask are, so what are the other key pieces of puzzle that needs to be in place for the tech companies here to bid for large projects? One of the things that I faced when I was doing that, when I was in your shoe, is my then client asked for liability insurance. And when I looked around in Nepal because it was a large scale project, I did not find the service providers, and it was pretty steep premium. So those are some of the questions that we need to identify. What is preventing us from assessing what are going to be the catalysts to boost our tech industry to really go bid for really large projects? One of the areas that I completely see even now is there are millions and millions of dollars in Nepal that are being spent on digitizing the government services, on the passport issuance, on NID, bunch of other stuff. One of the things I know for a matter of fact is it's a foreign company that won that contract, but the foreign company outsourced it to another company that's sitting in developing country. So we need to ask ourselves, what is preventing the tech companies in Nepal to bid for the large projects? I am not talking $1 million or $2 million. I'm talking over $25 million of chunk contracts. We need to ask ourselves, why do our tech companies feel that it will not be a fair competition? that the bureaucratic hurdles are too large, that is not worth it. We need to reduce those. And I think when we are making contracts, especially with these big companies, international companies that have won the bid, we need to start thinking about what kind of technology transfer, if there is a technology transfer clause, or management technology transfer as well. Whenever we talk of technology, we just think digital, we just think hard science, but innovation is equally, it's happening at quite a fast pace in the management sector as well. So those are kind of ease of doing business we need to think. The third area is the recognition for the diaspora strategy. Now, if you look around, if you look at the first tech companies that were started, some of the cutting edge tech companies, or even internet service provider, without taking the name, you'll recognize these companies were started by people who had the opportunity to understand how it is done outside, to have access to resources, to look for funding. So, and now we are sitting here, we have a high rate of migration to developed economies, and I have a feeling most of them are permanent migrations. And then we have temporary migrations in the form of labor force to Gulf and Middle Eastern countries. So the question, I think that, and I would really request you all to think, and IIDS especially I'd like to request, is we need to start researching on what our diaspora strategy can be. What is going to be that critical junction between people who are outside of Nepal and people who are here, so that the network, I'm not talking about capital here, I'm talking more about the network the diaspora have created, have earned in the country they reside, can then be utilized for the Nepali companies here. I'm talking very specifics. So think about if there is somebody, a Nepali who's working in Gap or Banana Republic or J.Crew, name one of these companies, can educate our garment industry or whatever industry here on how do you get into the preferred vendor lineup. Or somebody in Microsoft or Google helping our tech companies understand what does it take to become a preferred vendor. How do you arrange your documents? What are the risks that Microsoft, when it outsources, or Google, when it outsources certain thing, is looking for? I mean, that kind of network and linkages. So I think we really need to think about diaspora strategy. We need to flip how we are thinking. And we also need to accept, right? We live in an economy, thank God, it's liberal. We are not going to put bars on people saying you cannot leave or you have to study this. It's more about encouraging. So I don't see, given the nature of the country we live in, and thank God we don't live in a country where you needed to get a passport to get out of Kathmandu, it's going to be a tough call to reduce the outward migrations, especially among the students. There's going to be a lot of necessary criteria that needs to be fulfilled before we are able to. Better quality education, better lifestyle. Actually, we need a survey why students are leaving. We are right now just making assumptions, right? So another ask of IIDS is if we can figure out why students are leaving. That would also actually help us create our policies. But nevertheless, it's really important to start thinking of diaspora as ambassadors of Nepal. You had a great idea there, right? Let's brand Nepal as the place of tech. That's the place where diaspora community can really come into play and help. Finally, moving on to the fourth policy implication, which is ensuring fair competition. My biggest concern, I mentioned earlier as well, is whenever government gets into an industry, the only lens it puts through and it looks at everything is from regulation perspective. How do I control this? But we need to accept no industry, no segment of society is going to be risk-free. There are certain risks we assume for the greater good that it generates. So I think we all need to come together and also try to reframe how government sees itself, not just as a regulator, but as a facilitator. There are a couple of issues, I understand. There are issues on the tax differences between freelancers and companies. There are differences. I mean, I'm already getting emails from freelancers. It's like, oh, it used to be 1%, it's already 5%, or it's 10% is subsidized to 5%. When did this happen? There's a lot of gap between policymakers and conversation among the people that impacts, which is why the Bill Hackathon or other means of staying connected with the parliamentarians and the government is very much required. But how I would like to appeal to all the companies and the freelancers is right now we're shoring up the capital. If you think of majority of companies who are serving Nepal right now, who exist in Nepal, it all started probably similar way. You were working at a large company, you're learning the ropes, you're learning how things get organized, and maybe you were even doing a side hustle. And it was that journey that allowed you to shore up the capital, then that enabled you to open up your own company. And I think we're in this process. So I think there are certain differences, and we need to recognize these differences serve to create a more vibrant ecosystem. And I really hope the government realizes, and we need to realize, is government is always going to be behind when it comes to innovation. This is a systemic failure if the government goes around and penalizes people for being innovative. And that is the part where I think the private sector, you all will be much ahead, and the government policies and regulations will catch up. So I would say continue doing what you're doing and educate us on the new stuff that's happening. I'll just give a very simple example. There are a couple of kids that I know. They were looking for seed funding, and competition is not just in human resources, it's also in funding. They were looking for funding in Nepal to get started. We don't have a very vibrant angel investment and seed rounds. We have a lot of DFIs working in scale-ups where the ARR is pretty high, is $300,000 or $500,000, right? So these kids, well, they also studied at MIT. When they came to Nepal hoping to do something that, they'll be able to find funds and whatnot, then they went back out to California, and guess what? In a year and a half, they've raised over $10 million, and their companies are valued at $37.5 million. That's a year and a half. I'm waiting for, and that they are not even, they just had angel and seed. This is not even round one, and that's the valuation of the company because they're working in something quite cutting edge. So we also need to think of competition in the funding space as well, and we need to understand what are the regulatory hurdles that we need to ease, what kind of risks we should ask the angel investors and seed round companies to assume. So that, I think, we need to really come together, have an honest conversation, and move ahead. So with that, those are the 4 policy implications that I see from where I stand. As I conclude my remarks, I want also to ask ourselves, is tech going to be a big equalizer for Nepal? What do you think? Is tech going to be a big equalizer for Nepal? Yes or no? It is, right? Yes, right? So now let me ask you, what are the things we must do so we don't fall behind? If you look at the works of future, this report that gets produced, work from home is the first #1 job that comes up, which means the world is evolving. Remote work is going to happen. We're going to have digital nomads. There are certain ways in which Gen Z, Gen X, Gen Alpha works that is very different than what a millennial, our expectations is going to change. So we need to adapt to that. We need to adapt in our human resource policies. Do we follow Google's 80-20 Google time versus private time? How are we going to encourage people to work from home? What are the innovations required in how we organize people is something I think we really need to think if we're going to take advantage of this really wonderful space called tech. But now, earlier you mentioned it's going to be an equalizer for Nepal in the global marketplace. I think then it is only fair that we recognize and we accept that the access to tech is not equal in Nepal. How are we going to make it an equalizer for every Nepali? the same kind of opportunities that you and I had that enabled us to then sell our services abroad, how are we going to make that available to community school kids, to kids who are in places that don't right now have a fiber optics connection. They only are working out of their mobile. So that is a place where I think it's not just the government, it's all the development partners, all the ministries, all the parliamentarians, and all the companies. We need to remind ourselves there is a whole segment of untapped human resources, just like there is a whole segment of untapped gender-based resources that we have yet to tap into, primarily because they don't have access. And that is something we need to ask ourselves. Who are we going to optimize for? How are we going to rechannel back the fruits of tech industry back to the places so that they then can also be in the same position that you are today? With that, I would like to congratulate IIDS. I'd leave you with that thought of how, just like tech is going to be an equalizer for Nepal in global marketplace, think about what we need to do such that the fruits of tech can be really be spread all over Nepal. And it's not just kids in urban areas that have access. And we all have responsibility. And here are some of the very simple things you could do. We need to work at the policy front because government requires bachelors in education in order to go teach a high school, like in K-12. So this is something tech companies can pick up. Adopt a local or partner up with a local community college and go teach tech. I think it really starts in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Then you will be positioning them so that when they go to boot camps, then they become resources for you. Anyways, with that thought, I would again like to congratulate IIDS. This study is incredible. You're establishing what a think tank should be doing, which is researching, giving evidence, and really pushing the lawmakers to think along the lines that you need evidence, and it cannot be anecdotal, it cannot be Hojwako Burma, it cannot be one or two parliamentarians having one experience and saying yeyo bhanera. I hope you're going to do research on diaspora. I hope you're going to do research on why people are leaving, especially students are leaving. And hopefully we can partner up in that space as well. And a big thank you to tech industry. You're being recognized today, finally. And let's spread this message far and wide. Thank you very much.